Jack, I was 7 years old when this happened, but I wanted to. So we have the Sweet 16 games tonight, okay? And we know what we've got. You've got 4 games tonight, 11 seed Texas in the first one, taking the 2 seed Purdue. Full preview at the bottom of the hour of that game, 6:30, as we mentioned, down in Houston. It's the border war. I call it the Battle of the Corn. That's the 9th seeded Iowa Hawkeyes hooking up with Nebraska. Those campuses about 300 miles apart. Yet they're playing down in Houston, about 1,000 miles away from their campuses. But the Big Ten foes will play to go to the Elite Eight. Hawkeyes have pulled the biggest tournament upset of the year so far. They took out Florida, the 1 seed. And then we're back to San Jose for, as we said, Arizona and Arkansas. And then the final game might, as we've said, the KenPom rankings and the KenPom ratings would tell you this is the most even game of the night on paper. It's right now KenPom has Houston is the 4th rated team in the country through all the games this year, and Illinois is the 6th rated team all year long. So these are 2 really even teams. That might be the best game of the 4 as far as evenness and just what it's going to be, the strategy of it. But you got to stay up late to see it. It doesn't tip off till after 9 o'clock tonight in March Madness. But so we're still 12 days. Dozen days from now, they'll crown a national champion, Jack, in Indianapolis. One of these 16 teams that we'll see over the next 2 nights will win the national championship. But can we take a moment here in the A block to remember and remind you of the biggest college basketball championship game that was ever played? And I do it because it occurred 47 years ago today. This night, 47 years ago, 1979. It pitted Michigan State, the Spartans led by Magic Johnson, against the undefeated at the time Indiana State Sycamores, led by a guy named Larry Bird. And the game was played March 26th of 1979 in Salt Lake City, Utah. And the game itself, as far as all-time thrillers of basketball, it wasn't. Michigan State, with an incredible performance from Magic Johnson, won the game by 11. Here's some highlights of that matchup 47 years ago.
Man-to-man out of bounds again, Al. Bird with a block. Rebound Johnson. Magic Johnson with the ball. And he has fouled. They're not hitting that perimeter.
Yeah, the Michigan State zone defense did a great job on Larry Bird, and Magic had a big Final Four in that game. So the game wasn't a classic, but Michigan State won it. They won by 11. But Jack, when you consider what that single game and the cultural impact was over the next 10 to 15 years of basketball and what it still means today, mm-hmm. I mean, it launched the interest in college basketball. Like before that, the college basketball tournament was there, but that set the stage it also set the stage for the modern era of basketball stardom. And it happened 47 years ago tonight. Remains one of the more iconic moments in sports history. Because here, first and foremost, it was the game of basketball's, it birthed the most legendary rivalry, not just in basketball, maybe in all sports, right? When you talk about rivals, it started that night because that was the first time Magic Johnson and Larry Bird had faced off in a college basketball game. They'd been on all-star teams together, but they had never played. And many historians will credit that game with helping transform college basketball into March Madness as the phenomenon that we know it today. To this day, that game remains the highest-rated basketball game ever. Most watched, most viewed game. The NBC broadcast that night drew a Nielsen rating of 24.1 million. An estimated 35 to 40 million viewers tuned in, with about 18 million households watching. No basketball game, Jack, wherever, has ever come close to that. What we got in 1979, 47 years ago. And you know this, Jack, but you weren't alive for it. Their head-to-head battle that night extended and became even more pronounced when they got to the NBA. And it defined the league in the 80s.
Right. That's my thought. I mean, this rivalry kind of
that's why
the NBA, modern NBA.
Well, when you think Bird Magic, you think Lakers Celtics and the finals matchups and the rivalry. But that game launched March Madness. That game created what is today the millions and millions of brackets and that game. When you say that to this day, that's the most watched and viewed television game of all time, and it wasn't even that great of a game. And there was your NBC broadcast, but because from there, Magic Johnson was picked number 1 overall by Jerry Buss and the Lakers, and from there, Larry Bird became the Celtics legend the following year. with Red Auerbach, and the Magic-Bird rivalry became the center of the basketball world for more than a decade. They peaked with their 3 NBA Finals meetings in 84, 85, and 87. And in addition to the on-court intensity, Jack, it was without a doubt one of the most culturally charged and racially layered rivalries in American sports history. I mean, because, look, while the two stars were completely focused on competition and later developed and still are deep, friends to this day, I mean, the rivalry was heavily racialized by fans and the media.
Oh, that's like the number one thing about it.
I mean, the cultural climate at the time, it kind of mirrored the country. But Magic Johnson, black kid from urban Lansing, Michigan, Detroit, inner city. Larry Bird, the hick from French Lick, right? The white rural kid from the
Great White Hope. They called him that.
The Great White Hope. They became symbols in a league that was increasingly becoming dominated by black players. And Larry Bird was the Great White Hope, right? And the players themselves, they didn't get into that, but but of course Magic.
I mean, they kind of did. Isaiah Thomas.
Well, Magic was portrayed by as the flashy, naturally gifted street ball style athlete, right? Embodying the perception of black athleticism, showmanship, the whole bit, the big smile. That was just his personality, though. But Bird, what was Bird? He was the slow, unathletic, hyper-intelligent, hardworking gym rat basketball guy who succeeded through discipline and basketball IQ. And, of course, as you said, the classic White Hope was there. And that was the narrative. But, to say the two combatants who, shared mutual respect for one another that started on this night 47 years ago would be an understatement. Listen to this pieces of audio. This is Larry Bird, or Magic Johnson, I should say, talking about the first time he got to, because there was no internet back then, Jack. There was no YouTube. These guys had heard about one another. One's from Indiana, one's from Michigan, but they ended up on an all-star team together. And listen to Magic Johnson tell this story on a podcast of the first time they played on the same team together.
When I first met him, I said, all right, I'm going to see this dude, this white cat can really go.
But Larry's had something that most white boys don't have. Just say that. Just keep it real. Yeah, a little bit of yeah, it was different now. It was different now. Larry's different now.
We played on a team in college in a tournament together. Him and I were on the bench. The guys in front of us wasn't better than us, but Kentucky head coach was coaching the team, so he started 3 guys from Kentucky. But when we got in the game, we turned it out. But I saw this dude eat Jack Givens up. He was player of the year that year. And Larry Bird was just slicing and dicing him. And I said, oh, I called home. I said, it's true about this boy. I was calling everybody. This dude can play.
All right, so that's the first time, all right? And listen to Larry Bird talked about the same story that, I thought Magic was the best player. I was a good player, and then we're sitting on the bench in this all-star game thanks to the coach at Kentucky back in the day. But here's the Larry Bird side of that.
I can remember the first time I laid eyes on Magic Johnson. We played on an all-star team back in college. I could not believe what I was seeing in practice. I actually thought I was a bad judge of talent because neither one of us got to play in the games. But I can remember going home and telling my older brother, I just seen the best basketball player I'm probably ever going to see in my life. And he started to quiz me, ask me questions. Well, how good is he? I said, well, he's 6'9", he can handle the ball like a 5'9" guard, he can shoot the ball, he can pass like you can't believe. He goes, oh, come on. Well, after this 1979, the NCAA tournament, my brother come up to me, he says, yeah, he's a lot better than you.
Oh, man. And what's funny about the stereotypes, Jack, is their games were pretty similar. I mean,
Larry Bird, you look at he's one of the flashier players ever. The passes and the angles that he's hitting, the trick shots that he took.
Oh, the passing ability. I mean, their skills were very similar in that they were both about 6'9". They were both incredibly skilled. And Bird was a better shooter.
Yeah.
Magic
that's
was,
where they differ.
Was a little bit more athletic.
Get to the basket. Right.
And, of course, they go to the perfect teams, right? You got Jerry Buss and Showtime, and Pat Riley takes it and becomes Showtime Lakers and fast break and changing basketball that way, where back in Boston it's the old way. And great teams, though. Great teams, but the Bird Magic rivalry. But, when I say that led to, and any historian would tell you, it led to how we,
Star-driven league.
Star-driven league. I mean, the rivalries were kind of born out of that, because those two, there was so much respect, but then they end up in the perfect place. It's almost like scripted that the Magic would end up with this crazy new owner in L.A. and be Showtime, and Bird would end up in Boston and the Great White Hope. And, it changed the game. It changed the game. And if you've seen the movies now that they've made about it, you know that Magic Johnson turned down the Nike deal that Michael Jordan eventually took because this is 1979. It was only 2-3 years later that Michael Jordan is this kid on the scene playing at North Carolina and becoming Michael Jordan. Now, did Jordan ever really have a rival like that? No. But the rivalry between Bird and Magic through the 80s that started 47 years ago tonight built the NBA. Because not only did it create March Madness, Jack, and make it the what it is now. Because if you consider, and this is the reason this is a lot to me, I'm 53 years old. So as I'm growing up in the 80s, basketball wasn't very big as I'm growing up in my first 6-8 years, right? Basketball. Remember before Bird Magic, before that championship game, the NBA's finals were on tape delay. They weren't even live. And March Madness they played it, but it wasn't called March Madness. Right. I remember into the 80s as I'm, going through adolescence and growing up, this is when the Big East took off. Michael Jordan and the ACC and the Big East basketball. It also coincided with ESPN coming online and putting more basketball games on television, but it changed the game. That changed March Madness. It changed the brackets. They expanded the tournament to 64 teams. But at the same time, it resonated with college basketball and really launched what college basketball became in the 80s and now beyond. It also forever changed the NBA with the rivalry, the Bird Celtics, Magic Lakers rivalry, which led to Michael Jordan, led to everything we see. And I think it's worth noting as we're going to watch these Sweet 16 games tonight that, that game's 47 years ago. The way the game is globally marketed, the way the game is, the spectacle it is, the star-driven league, as you said, Jack, it's still influencing the game today. And Bird and Magic, still friends. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I
mean, it wasn't even that good of a game.
No, but it birthed an entire era of basketball. We wouldn't have. It was kind of it takes a couple eras to fully cement something as a big rivalry. And you had Jerry West losing a bunch of series, but competitively to the Celtics in the '60s. Then they both kind of had downturns in the 70s, at least Celtics did, and they came back into the 80s with, two of still the top, seven, top 10 players of all time.
Remember in the 70s, the NBA became seen as kind of a drug-addled league, and the ABA was formed, and it had a rival, and again, the NBA Finals were tape delayed. It dipped, and then, that was the start of the rise of college football. Major League Baseball was the biggest sport at the time. But yeah, that game, pretty awesome. And these games tonight are, everybody's built on top of that. Still to this day, the most watched game ever played. Most watched basketball game by more people in America than any game that's ever been put on television. Pretty incredible.